then that can cue them to recommend grief counseling or therapy to help that person with that process as well.
Now, I will tell you one of my greatest myths, shall we say. I don't mean M-Y-T-H-S. I mean M-I-F-F, like Frank S. Myths. Things I get miffed at. And one of the things that truly upsets me nowadays is, unfortunately, we constantly say, and remember, you should get good mental health counseling, whether it's, whether we're talking to widows, whether we're talking to people who have been part of these mass shootings, whether they've been burglarized, whatever. We all say we need to get people to mental health counselors, except, as you know very well, we are so limited in this country to have mental health counselors at all, let alone those who are specialists in helping the aging population and the senior issues. The veterans are desperately needed. We found that as a lot of our vets get older, they're coping with so many sorrowful things. So how do we find help? Where do the primaries direct us to? Where can the regular person go? Is it just typing in something online? How do we do this? And what would you recommend your colleagues start collaborating on?
Oh, very good question. Okay, so one of the recommendations that I like making is at psychologytoday.com. They have a very thorough website that not only provides educational resources and articles for the general public, but they also have a feature where you could just punch in your zip code, and then you could even filter the therapist according to what topics you want to focus on in treatment. So, for example, grief counseling or post-traumatic stress related issues. And then they'll bring up all the therapists, clinicians, social workers, marriage and family counselors, all the mental health professionals in your area, and you could scroll through them and find out which one might be a right fit for you. And with that said, I would also recommend that mental health professionals get logged in to Psychology Today. They do a vetting process. They'll make sure that whoever is in this database actually has the credentials to be there. So you'll have to submit your diploma, and then if you're licensed, you'll have to submit your licensure credentials as well.
Oh, that's great advice for your colleagues. That's wonderful. And then the other challenge is being able to pay for it, because I remember back home there was I had a certain type of coverage through a group, and yes, they covered mental health issues, which right there you can have a problem. Not all health programs provide mental health coverage, so right there you're in trouble. But it was, let's pretend it was 30% on my side. So I forget how it worked out, but it was something like if the counselor cost $130 and I had to pay the $30 for every treatment or whatever it came out to. If you have to go twice a week, that's $60 a week, and you multiply that by 4 weeks, because people don't get cured in 10 seconds. It's not like going for your antibiotic for your whatever bug you have.
Right, you can't just get a shot, or a pill and call it a day.
You've hurt your knee and you've got to stay off it, and maybe you've got, what do you call it, an NSAID. The prescription NSAID instead of, or a muscle relaxant, or something like that. That's a whole kit and caboodle. But to find a mental health pro and pay for it, we have a real challenge. That's a whole other issue. As people are running for Congress or president, they have to start taking that into the whole, whether you want Medicare for younger, whether you want the single payment system, whether you want whatever, we've got to add mental health issues in there, right?
Right, exactly. And I really like this new push for understanding that mental health is health. So when we talk about health, we're talking about both mind and body. now.
Thank you.
There used to be a distinction before because we had to raise up advocacy for our mental health. But I think we're at a place now where we just feel like, when we're talking about health, our mind and body are very much connected. And even if you want to encourage someone to take medicine or take care of their physical health, you're also going to have to, address it through their psychology as well. But on your note, as far as paying for treatment, even in psychology today, you could click this feature that identifies if a therapist works off of a sliding scale. And each therapist's practice is going to be a little bit different in how they address that. But in many cases, it would be based off of just a person's either income or what they have available or what they're able to pay. You could probably also find free clinics in your area that will be able to provide free or low-cost mental health services. And again, if you are fortunate enough to have appropriate coverage, then your insurance could also direct you to behavioral health clinics or mental health services as well under your insurance. And a lot of people do tend to prefer individual one-on-one treatment. But, there is such a great power in group therapy, especially when we're talking about something like loss and grieving. It helps really normalize the process and helps people understand that they're not alone. And that and participating in a group setting as opposed to individual could also potentially be more affordable for a lot of people.
Yeah, I know that I get a magazine from one of the Maryland hospitals, and besides fitness classes and blood pressure screenings, it has support groups, and in fact I have it right next to me. They have an amputee support group, diabetes support group, caregiver support group. One is called Arm in Arm, about breast cancer survivors and those who were just diagnosed. So check with the local hospitals, because a lot of them have either phone-in type things or one-on-one counseling or these group share counseling. And of course, I want to mention the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's 24/7. You can call it. You can do online chats. I'm going to give our listeners, and I want their care providers, family care providers, and of course their health care professionals, to keep this number nearby. If you even suspect a teenager or a new widower or someone you know is divorced, even any hint, at least start with this. They may not be in suicide mode, but they can usually refer you to other places. They'll ask you, so where are you located? And then they can help you find it. So it's 800-273-8255. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 800-273-8255. And that will help people, because not everybody even now has access to the internet. We know only about 60-something% of seniors use a computer. So a phone number always helps to get started.
Yep. And you know what I would also like to note about the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is that it's not only for people who are experiencing suicidal ideation, but it's also for people who suspect that someone they know may be at risk. And so you could also call them for support in helping someone else. So it's not just for people who may be at suicide risk, but for those who the bystanders, the people who may be at suicide risk, so they could help you walk through the process of how to support somebody.
Yeah, so people should note down, as you mentioned, holidays and birthdays of someone who's gone. These can be joyous occasions, but in case someone is not doing well and they sink even deeper and they refuse to come to a nice party, or they don't want to chat even on the phone or whatever, keep an eye out, keep an ear out, because the Lifeline says help someone else if someone you know is struggling emotionally or having a hard time with certain coping. And it is very tricky. The health pros and the legal experts, the law enforcement folks, not everybody sees it. The guy who just shot up the place this week, all of his coworkers said, we don't know anything was wrong. He wasn't getting fired. Yeah. There was no hint of problems. So it is tricky. And don't blame yourself if you don't spot it. That's critical, because we can urge them to get people functioning, but not everybody's going to find it, even the brilliant professionals, right?
Right, absolutely. I mean, there really is no standard profile that we can use to identify someone who might engage in that type of violent behavior, such as like a mass shooter. And even when it comes to suicide, even as mental health professionals or medical providers, I mean, we only know what people show us or tell us. And if someone is determined to not communicate this in any way and to really keep it hidden, then there's no way of anybody knowing. There are a list of red flags that you could find, and that information is available on the National Suicide Prevention website, or if you give them a call, they could give you some of those notes too. But otherwise, if someone's not, if their mood isn't changing, or if they're not telling you that they're having these thoughts, or they're feeling hopeless and helpless, then there's just really no way of knowing unless they're showing you or telling you.
Right, and I urge all your colleagues, and whether they're mental health professionals, primaries, oncologists, anybody, I know almost every professional association now has classes, continuing ed classes, CME type things, that will train you in the warning signs. Okay, right. And if your professional association is not, then urge them to have, maybe you can't get to something at the national or even a local conference, but that's the wonder now of webinars. I've been writing handout materials for webinars, because when people can't get on at that point in time, it's noontime on the East Coast, but it's only 9 a.m. on the West Coast, and you're making rounds or whatever, and you can't get there. So we urge everybody to learn more about bereavement issues, coping, help, and so forth. Okay, well, we need to be winding down from this week's Partners in Health and Biz, so I want to thank my guest, psychologist Dr. Alexis Moreno. So, Doctor, tell folks again about your program, how they tune in, any other contact information you want to give them.
Yes, so we have a radio show called Wit and Reason, and I host the show and invite other diverse professionals, both in mental health, medical, even just people who are really active in promoting health and wellness within their various industries, to come on the show and talk to us about a variety of topics. And we give people really relevant education, but then we also provide very practical tips. So you could catch the show on DC radio. That's, 96.4 HD radio. You could also listen to an archive of our shows on witandreason.com/shows. You could also find us on all of the social media ever at Wit and Reason, and that's WITANDREASON. We're on every weekday Eastern Time Zone, 11:30, and then we're also post the shows on our website and Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud, so people could listen to it at their leisure as well.
Now I'm going to remind folks, tune in next week at 9 a.m. for Gail Dixon and her next wellness topic. I do have an important note for listeners. At my last episode of PIHB as the business co-anchor, because my founder, Gail Dixon, and I are going in different directions. But never fear, folks. First of all, of course, you can find Wendy Meyeroff on LinkedIn. You can find me at WM Medical Communications, which is WM Medcomm, medcomm.com. And watch out, because for 10 years I've used the slogan Boomers and Beyond, and now that will be an upcoming podcast later this year. So if you want to be a guest, if you have ideas, if you want to find out more about the patient power and love last memory